Hey everybody, I am Maddie Heisey and I'm going to be doing a retelling of the Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful baby born, and her name was Snow White. Shortly after childbirth, her mother passed away, and her dad, the king, remarried a queen. And this queen was very rude and mean, and she just thought she was the best ever. So years go by, life's fine, but as soon as Snow White turns 7 years old, her stepmother, the queen, goes to her infamous mirror on the wall and says, "Who is the fairest of them all?" Her whole life, the mirror was telling the queen that it was her, but when Snow White turns 7, the mirror tells her Snow White is now the fairest of them all. And because of this, the queen becomes very angry, and she says, "I need to kill Snow White. She wants to be the fairest of them all." So she contacts her huntsman, and the huntsman goes out and tries to find Snow White. However, when the huntsman meets Snow White, she's afraid, she's so beautiful, and he takes pity on her, and he doesn't want to kill her. So he says, "I'll let you go," and she's like, "Oh my God, I have to run away, like I will run away, I'll be far away, like just tell the queen I'm not around anymore." So unfortunately, a wild boar passes by them, and because of what the queen said to him, she wanted him to bring back her lungs and Snow White's liver. So this wild boar comes along, he slaughters the boar, and he takes the boar's liver and lungs as proof that Snow White has been killed. Then the queen goes and eats the lungs and the liver, and life goes on. She thinks Snow White's dead, but meanwhile Snow White is rummaging around the forest trying to find her way. She's scared, she's lost, she's ripping her dress on branches, and she finally stumbles across a cabin in the woods, a small cabin in the woods, and she's like, "Oh, I finally found a place to rest." So she goes inside and she notices 7 of everything. 7 cups, 7 plates, 7 chairs, 7 beds, and she's like, this is odd. But she's hungry, she's starving, she's desperate. So she goes around and she eats a little bit out of each plate, drinks a little bit out of each cup as to not, fully eat any one of the portions. And then she goes into the bedroom. She lays on the first bed. It's a little too short for her. The second bed's a little uncomfortable. She goes and tries out each bed until she finally lays down on the 7th bed and sleeps. Later that night, the dwarves come back from working and they find her sleeping. But she's so beautiful, they're not afraid. They're not going to wake her up. They let her sleep. That morning, she awakes and she tells them her story. She says that the queen's trying to kill her and that she doesn't know what to do, but they say to her, "Hey, as long as you keep house, you clean up, we'll look after you and you can look after the house." And she says, "Of course, I would love to do that." But they say to her, "If the queen does find out that you're here though, she's going to try to come after you. So never let anybody into this house unless we're here." So she goes on about her life. The dwarves go off to work one day, and the queen notices that she's alive because she asked her mirror, thinking it's going to be her that's the fairest because Snow White should be dead. But no, the mirror says Snow White is in the cabin in the woods with the 7 dwarves. She is the fairest of them all. And so it takes the queen 3 tries to try to take out Snow White. She first tries and disguises herself as a woman selling laces and corsets, and she comes to her house in the woods, persuades her to come in, and she ties the corset super tight and suffocates Snow White, and Snow White passes out. She leaves, the queen leaves, and the dwarves come back and they revive her. They're like, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing? You can't let her in. She's trying to kill you." Again, she says, "I won't let anybody in, I won't let this happen again." But it does, it happens again. The second time, the queen comes back disguised as a person selling hairbrushes and combs. But this time the combs are laced with poison. So as soon as she goes to brush her hair, Snow White passes out once again and has to be revived later that night by the dwarves when they come home from work. Third time happens when the queen asks the mirror once again, "Who is the fairest of them all?" And again, the mirror says, "Snow White. Snow White is the fairest." And she has it. She's like, "This is the final straw. This will do it. And this might kill me." So she goes into her lair, she creates this apple that's half white, half red, and the white part's non-poisonous and the red part's full of poison. She goes to the cabin and she persuades Snow White to eat this apple, but Snow White is like, I'm a little leery about this, it could be poisonous, and the queen says, don't worry, I'll eat this half, you eat the other half. So they split the apple, and as soon as Snow White takes a bite, she passes out and dies. Then the queen leaves thinking her job is finally done. The dwarves come back and they mourn. For 3 days and 3 nights, they mourn over Snow White's passing. And they put her in a glass casket because she's so beautiful, she needs to be seen. And they put her in this casket on top of a mountain, and they take shifts on who watches her. And one day, a prince comes along and says, I need this. I want this casket, I want her, and I will take good care of her and respect it and honor it. Like, can I have it? And they're like, well, as long as you honor her, sure. So the prince is like, okay, great. So he gets his guards to carry the casket to his castle. However, it's a little bumpy road, and one of the guards falls and trips, and the casket bangs around, and part of the apple shoots out of her throat. It dislodges from her throat, and she comes back to life. And when she comes back to life, she's scared. She's like, what happened to me? Where am I? And the prince relays everything to her and says that I'm going to take care of you. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore. And they go off to get married, and she's happy. Everything's beautiful. And then, as they are preparing for their wedding, they send out invitations, obviously, and the old stepmother, the old queen, gets an invite, but she doesn't know who the bride is, but she knows that it's somebody beautiful. So she has to go to see who it is. When she gets to the wedding, she sees that it is Snow White. She's still alive. She's getting married. She looks beautiful. And at the wedding, they make the queen put on a pair of hot iron shoes and make her dance with them until she dies. And that is the story of Snow White. And that's how she lives her happily ever after. Thank you.